Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Skorka, and I'm President and CEO of Opera America. And welcome to a Making Connections evening that we host here on a regular basis. For those of you who are new to Making Connections, it is a workshop series that we do 10 or 12 in the course of the year, providing career advice to aspiring artists, singers, composers, directors, and other opera artists. Many of our programs are streamed live and recorded for our website, as this evening's is, so we not only have you here in the audience with us, but we also have a number of people watching from the Opera America website. You may be wondering, those of you who are repeat attenders, what we're doing here on the 18th floor, because you're used to coming to Opera America on the 16th floor. And for those who are new to Opera America, I have to apologize for our appearance. We just moved up here last week. The move was on Friday. This is kind of like having a housewarming party 3 days after you've moved in. And we had to move off the 16th floor because we are constructing an opera center, the National Opera Center, for the opera industry here in this building on 2 complete floors. We are removing ceiling slab and cement and steel to create a 2-story audition recital hall, recording studio, rehearsal rooms, practice rooms, library, conference rooms, a visitor's business center. We'll be occupying 2 complete floors of this building. And in order to get out of the way of construction, we had to leave our office on the 16th floor and move up here for about a year to the 18th floor. So again, forgive our appearance. There are boxes all around if you use the men's and ladies' rooms, which are over here. But I think you'll welcome the end result in a year when the Opera Center opens to serve you and your colleagues. This evening we are absolutely delighted to welcome one of opera's truly great singers, Dolora Zajick. If Dolora would come on out. Tired of hearing applause.
Get used to it.
Well, it certainly is nice to hear the applause for you here tonight. Birgit Nielsen said Dolora Zajick was the only one existing today without any competition in the market. Marilyn Horn said there are mezzos, and then there are mezzos who are really like sopranos singing mezzo repertoire with maybe half the voice of the great mezzos of the past. Zajick, on the other hand, is a force of nature. And it's not just her amazing voice, it's what she can do with her voice because of her superb technique and dedication. So before we get to the advertised subject of the evening, which is about cultivating the dramatic voice, I wanted to talk just for a few minutes about developing the opera singer in the first place. You were born in Oregon and raised in Nevada, and you joined the chorus of the Nevada Opera while you were still a pre-med at the University of Nevada. Did you always have a voice? Could you always sing?
Yes.
Elementary school chorus?
Well, it was about 17 when I discovered I had a voice.
How? Singing with friends, auditioning for a show?
I was singing in our madrigal group in high school.
And something just...
Well, actually, it was a little bit of an unusual situation because my brother and my sister were in it too. So, and we were all loud. So it really kind of balanced out.
Oh, fine. Well, Thanksgiving dinner must have been quite something with the loud voices. So you went to college as a pre-med because it had never occurred to you to think about a career in opera?
Well, it's a very complicated subject because I actually wanted to play the piano since I was 7, and circumstances didn't allow it that were beyond my control. And by the time I was old enough to make my own decisions, it was too late to be a professional musician. So I decided to be practical about it, become a doctor, and pursue music as an avocation. And the avocation ended up being an avenue to. I found out I could still be a professional musician. So I ended up going into music anyway.
And you joined the chorus of Nevada Opera. You were studying with Ted Puffer, who founded Nevada Opera.
Yes.
And he said, "Why don't you come sing in the chorus?"
Yes, and I got my first role the first year I started taking voice lessons.
Wow.
So, but, you know, before you're impressed with that, it was Kate in the Pirates of Penzance, and at that time, I had no high notes, and the soprano singing Edith had no low notes. So I sang her low notes, and she sang my high notes.
That sounded like...
Actually quite funny, because she would go, let us shut our eyes and leave them there together. Let us shut our eyes and talk about the weather.
Have you ever done that in a proper opera on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera?
No. Although I think some people have done that by accident.
That is wonderful. And has your early pre-med education stood you in good stead? Have you ever called upon your scientific ability in your career as a singer?
You know, believe it or not, it has little to do with singing. You can study everything from a scientific view all you want. It's still a subjective experience. And a singer has to have what I call kinesthetic empathy. And that is the ability to know what the body's doing just by how it sounds. There's a true story of a Russian choreographer who went blind. And he was able to effectively continue his job because he could put his ear to the floorboard so he could tell exactly where their arms were and how they were landing on the floor by the sound. Like if a pianist went to a concert, they could close their eyes and they could feel something's funny going on with his shoulder because you can hear it in the sound. With a singer, it would be you close your eyes, you have a singer close their eyes and you sing a vowel, and then you tighten your upper lip or you jut your jaw out and you see if they hear that change. And someone who has kinesthetic empathy can do that. And that's a very important ability in being able to absorb a vocal technique. Because you can have the greatest voice in the world, you can be musical, you can be a good actor, but if you don't have that kinesthetic empathy, you're going to have a very difficult time making technical progress. And you may have a very brilliant and very short career, but a long career is highly unlikely.
Well, at the end of my set of questions here, I talk about a long career, because you have been singing a most taxing repertoire for a long time, and yet one doesn't hear any diminution in your voice for having sung this repertoire for the last 20 or 25 years. So I want to come back to that.
Well, I think there's a misperception about what a dramatic voice is capable of doing at certain ages. 100 years ago, people began their careers a decade earlier. And if the great Verdi mezzos, for example, two of them, Fedora Barbieri, I believe she sang her first Omneris at 20, and Stignani at 22. Giulietta Simeonato followed a different path. She sang small roles until she was 35, but not by choice. It was because nobody recognized her talent, because she was in the shadow of Stignani, and then later Barbieri, who was a great natural talent. And so she eventually ascended and reached the same recognition that they had later in her career. But Stignani lasted for decades. She didn't.
Why that decade difference, do you think?
I think that, well, for one thing, we begin training later, and when they do begin training, they only get a weekly lesson. Back then, you got a daily lesson, and you work either with an impresario, or you worked with they were different back in those days, because a lot of them, they were jack of all trades. They played the piano, they knew their languages, and they worked with the singers, and we would call them coaches, but they were more like a combination voice teacher, conductor, coach. So they got a more comprehensive daily workout, and girls started as young as 12 and boys as young as 15. Robert Merrill started taking voice lessons when he was 15, and look at how long his career lasted.
Rosa Poncel sang Forza at the age of 20.
Right. So you have to look at what has changed between the way they did things then and how they do things now. Okay, one thing is that theaters got bigger. The operas that Verdi wrote were written for smaller theaters in Italy. They weren't meant for these big barns that they do them in now. Okay, so that changed. Another thing that changed is instrumentation got louder. Bore holes in brass instruments were tweaked, and they're different now to make more sound. The reeds are made to put out more sound. They even tweak Stradivariuses now, surreptitiously. So there's a lot of, an orchestra now puts out more sound than they used to. So now, if a dramatic voice wants to sing Verdi or Wagner, and especially Verdi's actually requires more volume than Wagner. Whereas I think Vagner requires more stamina. What was I saying?
Well, we're talking about why the decade difference, and just you're talking about
yes.
how different it is today.
Okay, so one of the things that is different is that the house sizes change. So now a singer has to reach a certain physical maturity before they can do the same rep that they could have done back then. So how do you fill that gap with a young singer so that they get the kind of training and experience that their more lyric colleagues get?
And let's just do a definition of terms for a second here.
Okay.
You were commenting on the fact
That you and your siblings had loud voices,
Yes.
and we're talking about a dramatic voice. Now, dramatic and loud are not the same thing. So
Yes, they are.
how do you define a dramatic voice? Is it volume? Is it color?
It's, okay, a dramatic voice is one that can handle the orchestration, can sing over those brass instruments, and sings the heavy-duty repertoire. A Verdi singer doesn't necessarily mean a dramatic singer. You can sing, if you sing, you can sing, there are roles that are almost like coloratura soprano roles. Was the page or the boy that sings in Ballo. I mean, that is made for a very small lyric voice. So you can't really say a Verdi singer is a dramatic singer, although a dramatic voice is required to sing the certain Verdi baritone roles and certain Verdi mezzo roles and certain tenor roles and some soprano roles. So and there are some Verdi soprano roles that can be handled by Mozart singers. Eleanor Stieber type of singer that can handle that kind of repertoire. But the volume level is not as necessary for the soprano as it is for the baritone and the tenor and the mezzo. Unless it's except for in some specific instances where Verdi really wrote, like Lady Macbeth or something like that, where they really have to have a voice that really puts out the sound.
So it is more volume for you than color in defining a dramatic voice.
Yes.
And just technically, what gives the volume? What makes the volume? Do you sing harder than anyone else, or is your body just built in a way that creates that volume? What creates it?
Yeah, it's something you're born with. It's not something you can create. You're born with that body, and it has to do with a whole combination of things. One of the things we're doing with we're measuring singers with large voices. We're measuring their chest sizes, where we've noticed that one of the things that is consistent is that their chest size is bigger. And it's a combination of either length, width, or roundness. So a person, in other words, or any combination of those. So, and that's why you can have someone who looks like they're relatively thin, but they've got a lot of sound. But if you notice that when they sit, they're taller than anybody else, because they're long from here to here. And some people have round chests, barrel chests, and some people have wide chests. They're wide at the back, and sometimes people are diamond shaped. But what we're discovering is that the chest size is bigger, the thoracic cavity is bigger. And another thing that we've noticed is that dramatic voices, and there's always exceptions, tend to have wide cheekbones, but that's not a hard, fast rule.
If it is about body type and you're born with this natural sound, why does it take longer for the dramatic voice to mature?
Well, Actually, it doesn't. That's the problem. But it does in the context of now that we have to sing in bigger theaters without our instruments.
Mhm.
So the solution in my book is you need to start singing this rep at an early age, but in order to do it, it means you have to start studying at an early age in the right situations. And those conditions don't exist today.
Mhm.
Where's a 13-year-old gonna go and get a daily half-hour lesson and acting at a conservatory level today, like they used to? Doesn't exist.
Is teaching, or does teaching a dramatic voice require a different skill set from the voice teacher?
No. But it does require a sensitivity to where the voice really is and where they're technically at and when they're ready to do something. Usually the reason why a person has to wait now is because they're not ready. They're not technically ready. It's not because they're not physically ready. I learned azucena when I was 24.
And you had a
I
voice,
covered it,
and you had a voice teacher who recognized
yes,
what was unique about your voice.
yes.
Which is not, the run-of-the-mill voice teacher may not recognize in a young person that this is really a big instrument.
Well, I think there's a big fear of damaging a young voice because there is a lot of damage that goes on. And the wisdom that is true for 99% of the rest of the singing population does apply because a lot of young singers do try to make their voices bigger than they are. But for the truly big voice, you have to let the voice be what it is. It'll thrive that way.
So the 24 Italian songs and arias in the Yellow Book, or Fly High, the things that every young singer sort of walks around,
Well, they are good, but you got to allow the singer to sing them operatically. That's why they used to work, and they still work with the people who know what to do with them. And then when you get older and you're doing it on a recital, then you do it in the Baroque way that it was intended to be. But a young singer that doesn't know what they're doing yet, they've got to cut their teeth on something.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea is to get the voice just rolling in an honest way so that they're not pushing and they're not doing any damage to their vocal folds and everything is all in the right place and it's focused.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And is it fair, because you do think about voice teaching as well, because you run a studio for large voices, is it easy to tell when someone has a naturally large voice and
Yes.
from when someone is pushing to just make a loud sound?
Obviously, it's very obvious. And and a lot of people have a misperception about pushing too, because pushing also occurs in piano singing. It's basically the opposite of breathy singing. It's you're literally pushing your vocal folds together to make that sound. It's really a long glottal, is really what pushing is, and which means there's not enough air behind it. There's not enough breath support behind it.
And did Ted recognize all of this when you started studying in
Yes.
Nevada?
Yeah, he did.
I just think you're remarkably lucky to have found a teacher who understood.
It was very interesting because I was in this place where it was very isolated, it was very solipsistic, it was cut off from the rest of the opera world, and in my case it couldn't have been a better situation because I didn't follow the normal track that a lot of people ended up taking. And the library the budget was so minuscule that they had stopped buying recordings past 1962, so I thought that Embestignani and Giulietta Simeonov and Minghini Cataneo and well, these people, that's what they sounded like today.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that had changed. And I didn't know that all of a sudden chest voice had become a disease. Because in the 70s, it was a disease in the opera world. All of a sudden, oh no, you're going to sing chest voice, you're going to hurt yourself. Well, if you do it improperly, of course you're going to hurt yourself. But it's very simple what you need to know. You just need to know that you shouldn't sing it higher than your passaggio.
Mm-hmm.
When you get to that break, just don't, chest voice below that break is fine. You're not going to hurt yourself. It's what you do above.
Mm-hmm.
That's where people get damaged.
Mm-hmm. So there you are. You have finished at least 20 of your 24 Italian songs and arias, and you can't just jump from there to Azucena.
Actually, I did.
And would you recommend for others that they really start looking immediately at the rep that feels right, or are there intermediate steps?
If they're technically ready, and that is a very important if.
And what does that mean?
Well, it means that you have to know what you're doing with your voice. It means you have to know how to sing high notes and low notes, and you have to know how to sing without a yodel in your voice and without a vibrato that's out of control, and you know how to do coloratura, and you don't have to do it with lightning speed, but you have to know the basics of coloratura, and it's important to be able to do those things. If a singer cannot sing coloratura, they should not do Verdi yet. You have to be able to do coloratura, and even if you never sing it in public, you should get one of those Rossini arias like Cenerentola or Non più, or Una voce poco fa or something, and learn it and use it as a vocalese and learn how to sing coloratura. I can't emphasize how important that is. Most people, when they have dramatic voices, they think they're dramatic voices because they don't have coloratura, and it's not that way at all.
And when you think of some of the great dramatic voices, they would rest with Mozart. That Ludwig could sing Una voce
or
poco
bel
fa.
canto.
Absolutely. Now, did you know that you knew how your voice was working, or that it was working well, or did you rely on other people to tell you, yes, Dolora, it's working?
I knew when I did something right, and all those little, and it was like it was learning 1,001 little tiny things, and I learned, okay, that's working, I know that's right, I haven't figured that out yet, and I would just put the little pieces together, and then one day I realized I knew what I was doing. Because you just have to add those little pieces.
Was that in Nevada? Was it
Yes.
here? So even before you came to New York for Manhattan School?
My vocal technique was basically intact. I didn't know how to sing pianissimo yet, but I could do the rest of it.
At age?
I was like 28, almost 29.
Okay. So through your 20s, you really mastered the technique, and you learned finally how your instrument worked.
Yes.
But then you came to Manhattan for still more study.
Yes.
Why?
Well, I wasn't getting any work, and I really didn't know how to start a career, and I wanted to go somewhere I could put my foot in the door and at least be around music and be in New York and be doing something. I mean, if I'm not in an opera, at least I'm in a school. That's how I looked at it.
Because I think lots of times large voices do not have as many avenues for young artist programs and other training initiatives that the lyric singers have. They don't sing chorus as easily. It's just not a blending kind of voice for an ensemble. What do you recommend singers to do? They're done with school, maybe done with conservatory, but the voice isn't quite settled in yet. What do you do?
Well, the venues are not many, but they're there if you keep your eye out for them. I know this sounds kind of like a person is working backwards when they do this, but sometimes you have to create your own venues. Even if that means just getting your friends together, get a really good coach that knows what they're doing, and put on your own little scenes program. I mean, this is the worst case scenario, but it's a place to start. And then next step, you need to find some sort of an apprenticeship where you really get to sing. Now, those are not so many. A lot of apprenticeships are really glorified chorus gigs, and some of them you really do get coaching, and you have to seek those out and find out which ones those are, and they shift. Because sometimes you can have somebody who knows what they're doing, and then all of a sudden they're not there anymore, and they're over at this place. So these things it's like shifting sands all the time as to where that place is going to be. And so you have to basically ask a lot of questions.
Mhm.
Like if you know somebody with a big voice and you say, well, were you in this program? What was it like? What was it like?
Mhm.
And that's another way to get good information.
How do you know whether your teacher is right for your voice?
Okay, that's a very good question, and it's a very important question because that's part of the ability to sing. A singer who has what it takes knows when they're with the right teacher. They know. You know when you're making improvement, and you know when you're not. And if a student can't tell, one of the things I run into, now if the student's really young and they're inexperienced, that's a different thing because it's all very new to them.
Mhm.
I'm talking about in their adolescent years up until about the age of 20. But start getting in the 20s, a student knows, they know when someone's helping them and when they're not. And we get kids that come in and they say, well, so-and-so's telling me to sing this vowel on this pitch, and so-and-so's telling me to sing this, and so-and-so's telling me I should do this, and I don't know what's right. We have to dig in there because it could be that they just don't want to offend people, and they might be afraid that if they offend this person that they won't get a job in this company over here. Okay, and you have to sort through that a little bit and find out if that's really the problem. And then find out if they really can't tell, then they haven't got what it takes.
Mhm.
And here's one of the other misperceptions. Not everybody, but most people think of the opera world as something where there's all these singers, thousands of aspiring singers, and only a few slots, and very few singers can get into those slots. And there's this terrible competition, and there's a lot of great singers out there. Well, that simply is not true. Because when the operas make up their short list, there's always gaps in the casting. Well, who will we get to do that role?
Mhm.
And the short list is that, so the people who can really do it are not that many. When casting directors go, well, we'd like to do Lohengrin. Okay, who's going to sing it?
There's plenty of opportunity for anyone who can sing those roles.
Yes, there's plenty, exactly.
Now, you went to Maryland.
Yes.
From Manhattan School?
Yes.
And you just thought that, why was that the right next step for you?
Well, it was the right next step because Terry McEwen, who was running the program, had an ear for the old sound. So he recognized what a lot of people were not recognizing. First of all, he knew I was not a soprano when he heard me because he had heard Stignani and Barbieri and Simeonato live because he recorded them, for most of them, 2 of them.
And let's just pause there for a second. So you feel that there were, in fact, a lot of people who heard you who didn't understand what your voice was.
Correct.
Auditions, competitions that were...
I was told I was ruining my voice. If I sang that big, I would ruin my voice. Every time, sometimes they gave me a year, sometimes they gave me 5 years. And I've been ruining my voice for 35 years.
But Terry, of course, so
Uh-huh.
steeped in the tradition, recognized the sound.
Recognized it instantly.
Were you ever discouraged in the feedback that you got from people who just didn't understand what was going on for you?
I know this is going to sound really strange, but no. Because I was so concentrated on what I had to learn.
Mm-hmm. Were you yourself steeped, because you said that at university they only had recordings of the 1962.
Yeah.
So you learned the sound, you heard the sound, and you recognized in you made the connection
Yes,
that Terry McEwen was able to make.
correct. I identified with those voices.
And then you went to San Francisco and were there for 2 years?
I was there for 2.5 years. I did Maryland, then I did the Western Opera tour, and then I was an Adler Fellow for 2 years.
And was your first really big role in then San Francisco? Did they put you on the main stage and the rest is history?
Actually, well, yes, but they actually groomed me for that role. They
Mhm.
groomed me from day one, but I didn't know that's what they were doing.
Mm.
They gave me Bertolito because it had miles and miles of recitative, and they wanted to see if I could do a whole role, a large role like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then they gave me Quickly in the non-subscription audience, but they did that for all the Adler Fellows, and a few past ones, sang the 6 performances in the main house of Falstaff. And I did a lot of small roles. I did Suzuki, more Suzukis than I ever want to do. And my first role was the High Priestess in Aida.
Mm-hmm.
And it was lean team prizes next to the last Aida.
Great to have been on that stage.
Yeah, yeah, it was wonderful. And she took me under her wing and she gave me all kinds of advice about what you do for a career. She said there's only 2 things that count. She says that you can sing and and what you do on that stage.
Mm-hmm. In between, in all of this, did you have any other kind of singing engagements? Choral work? Did you do recital work? Did you sing soloist in oratorio?
I was in a church choir where I got to do a lot of solo work.
Here in New York?
Yes, First Presbyterian Church, in the late 1970s and 1980, around in there.
So you were singing, you were earning some income, you were just learning some repertoire?
Yes, basically. I did Santuzza and some of those unfortunate neighborhood. There was 3 violins and a piano. You could only enter on one side of the stage.
But that delivered value to you.
It did.
Giving you some...
I got something. I really did get something out of it. One was there was a stage performance at the New Jersey Y, and I got to do my first big role with an orchestra, and it was Santuzza, and then I did it a stage version in this little church basement, and but it was valuable.
So you didn't think to yourself, oh, if I do that, I'll never get taken seriously?
No.
Working is good, singing is good, learning the rep is good.
You know, this is gonna sound really strange, but I just figured it would happen, and it might not have happened.
Well, you would have become a doctor.
And then I was very fortunate that I always fell into the hands of the right people, like my management. You know, Betsy Crittenden, who's I've been with from the very beginning, and she's been an excellent manager. And that's another thing I want to touch on. A singer really needs a good manager.
And I wanted to get there too.
Yeah.
So when in this whole emergence of your great voice, did you find management? How did you do that? How did the whole manager connection happen?
Well, actually, it was the head of the opera program, the opera department, in the workshop at Manhattan School of Music, went to Betsy and said, I've got this singer I don't know what to do with. Could you hear her? And so I auditioned, and what did I sing? I think I sang Non Più Mesta.
You sang Joan of Arc for sure. You sang O Don Fatale. Must have sung another.
I think it was Non Più Mesta.
Yeah, you sang.
And then she put her head down, and I thought, well, no.
Right.
So you even were under Betsy's loving care when you went out to San Francisco
Correct.
for Maryland.
Correct. In fact, she's the one that arranged that audition.
Okay, so manager really matters, but it's hard to get.
But I want to tell you, but you see, that has a little catch to it too, because a manager is not going to mean anything unless you can sing, and very few people really know how to sing, or have that kind of a voice to have that kind of a career, and that's unfortunately a brutal fact. It's a hard fact, but it's one that it's a reality that has to be dealt with. Singing's a very strange and difficult act. I mean, what a person has to do to be able to sing. They have to be able to do so many things. In a way, opera is our highest art form because it combines all the arts into one performing art. And there's always something missing because it is so complex. I mean, nobody seems to have everything in total 100%. I mean, there's this joke that God was handing out, had a basket, and he had professions he was handing out to babies before they were born, and he said, okay, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be an accountant, you're gonna be a mother, you're gonna have 5 wonderful children, and finally he gets to the end and he's late for an appointment, and there's 2 people left, and there's just a few things left in the basket. He dumps them on top of them, and he says, "And you're gonna be opera singers."
I bet
So-
that's wonderful. As you think about young artists, of course, voice lessons matter a lot, coachings, learning the music. What else would you suggest that the potentially dramatic voice, the young dramatic voice, what should they do? Listen to recordings. Is listening to recordings important in order to own the history of what you're singing?
It's part of it. But it's only a part of it. I know people that collect millions of records and they can't sing. So it's more. You have to know how to sing. Learn how to sing. Don't just go to a conservatory and think that you're going to get the right teacher. Find the teacher and go where they're at. And if they're at that conservatory, that's where you go.
Mm-hmm.
Because you might get the bottom of the barrel. It's tricky. It's tricky to find that right teacher. And what teacher is good for one person might not be right for another person.
Do you think word of mouth is a good way that if you think you have a voice like someone, you talk to them about who they might
Well,
recommend?
it's one way. It's one way as a lead,
Mhm.
but the only way you're going to find out if a teacher's good is to try them out.
Mm-hmm.
You need singers have this thing where the teacher auditions them, but they're also auditioning the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I always advise my the singers in our program to we teach them to go out and audition the teachers and find out who works for you,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know where that chemistry is going to be and where it's going to work.
When you give feedback, you want to be encouraging, of course, but have you told young singers, dear, it's just that no, it's not working, that you're really not the kind of voice you think you are, or I just don't see a career happening for you? Honest feedback is hard to come by.
But
for
I
a
think you
singer.
can be honest and kind at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think the best thing to do is to set a time frame.
What would you recommend as a time frame?
Well, if you're 35 years old and you come to me and you say, I want to be an opera singer, I have a dramatic voice, and somebody says, I got a dramatic voice, it's really impressive, but their musical training is not intact, they're not going to get it at that age.
Mm-hmm.
Because the older you get, the more difficult it is to absorb that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't, and even if you have the talent, you can't cram that kind of training into just 1 or 2 years. And if their languages are bad at that age, vocal habits get set at that age.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's just a matter of tweaking something, or they've always been on a general course of improvement, that's a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do is everybody has their own time limit, and you tell that person, okay, this is what you need to learn in this period of time. These are your chances.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have the right to tell somebody that they're not going to make it, because they might.
Mm-hmm.
You never know. I was one of those people, So I was told I wasn't going to make it by a lot of people. So I don't think anyone should ever tell someone you're not going to make it, you don't have talent. I think the best thing to do is set a time frame and say, this is what you have to accomplish, and give them the realistic value of what they have and what they don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And say, well, you have this and this, but you're weak here, you're strong here, and this is what you need to do in this period of time. And you can say, you've got a running chance, but there's no guarantee, or it would be extremely difficult, so set yourself a date, and if you don't make it by that certain date, that's the time to hang your hat up.
Mm-hmm.
And give it everything you got, and then keep the deadline, and then you can go on with your life, and then you're not in this nebulous, never land where you're going to be a singer forever until you're 40, and by that time you're definitely not going to have a career.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, by 35 you're not going to have a career unless the voice is so extraordinary and the other talents are so extraordinary, but that is extremely rare.
I want to connect longevity to early training. We've sat next to dinner twice together, and both times you've let me know that you're over 40. And you have
I'm a lot older.
You've been singing this repertoire, as you say, for 35 years. And yet, I don't think anyone could hear any diminution in your vocal production and your sound. To what do you attribute your longevity, and how is that rooted in your having learned to sing in the first place?
I think it's rooted in, well, there's several reasons. The first is I had good early technical training. The second is that I've always been very careful about how much I sing.
Mm-hmm.
I never overextend myself.
Let's just pause there for 1 second. How much do you sing in the first meeting? What is your pacing?
Well, I've never, my manager could probably answer that question better than me.
I'm sorry.
Dolora had just said that she doesn't sing too much. She paces herself is one of
How many
the
performances a
careers.
year?
How much does Dolora do in the course of the year?
I don't know exactly, but what we're very careful to do is make sure that she has gaps between engagements.
Mhm.
You know, that she's at the Met now, and then she'll have a couple of weeks off, and then she'll go to Spain, she'll have a couple of weeks off. She's never been one, a lot of singers will do 2 engagements at once.
Mm-hmm.
That they may be rehearsing at the Met and singing performances still in Chicago. But Dolora never
Mhm.
did that. She does one thing, concentrates on one role and what she's doing at a time.
Mm-hmm. And in the couple of weeks you might take between engagements, what do you do in those 2 weeks? Just relax? Are you studying? Do you sing during those 2 weeks?
It depends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it depends on if I got something new to learn. If I don't have anything new to learn in that particular period of time, sometimes I won't even look at a note.
Mm-hmm.
It depends. Depends on what I need. Sometimes I need to rest,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I have other interests. So
you early on talked a little bit about the difference between being a Wagner singer, stamina, Verdi singer, different qualities, coloratura. Is there a big vocal difference between a Verdi dramatic singer and a Wagner dramatic singer?
I don't think you quite need as much volume to sing Wagner that you do in Verdi. I noticed that like cutting through the brass is a little easier.
Mm-hmm.
With Verdi brasses, the way it all clusters together, it takes a lot more of sound to
Mhm.
really ride the orchestra. Whereas in Wagner, he makes it easier to ride the orchestra. Wagner was a lot more sensitive to that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, probably because he was having the singer sing over a long period.
And if you could adjust the relationship between training institutions and opera companies, do you see places where we as an industry could do better in helping nurture the dramatic singer?
I think that in a way it's already starting, because what I've noticed is that training programs are taking more and more, they're taking bigger chances on bigger voices. And they're willing to take kids that have a little bit of a problem here and see if they can fix it before they dump them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, and I just noticed an increase in large, people, them taking larger voices.
Mhm.
I've noticed it pretty much everywhere.
Mhm.
So I think that people are aware of the problem. So I don't think the problem is in the opera companies. The problem is early training, early intervention, and the problem is that it's the general conservatory mentality, in that everything is classroom work and there's very little one-on-one individual coaching, which is the way it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Getting that half hour a day of individual attention is something that conservatories just don't do. And one of the reasons they don't do it is they don't have the money.
Mm-hmm.
It just costs a lot of money to do.
And they build enrollment and suddenly it's all classroom work.
Exactly, and then it just becomes it's hard, and the class sometimes has to be dumbed down to get everybody in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there is value in group work, but it needs to be balanced with more individual work.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of conservatories, there's an imbalance between what goes to the instrumental department and what goes to the vocal department, because the vocal, it takes costs a lot more money to train a singer than it does an instrumentalist. You have to have all these linguist coaches and body movement and acting, and it just costs more.
Tell us about your training program.
Well, we address those issues. We have a program for young voices, and we take them as young as 15.
Based where?
We're based in Utah. It's called the Institute for Young Dramatic Voices. And the workshop at the moment takes place in Utah, but we're probably going to be moving to San Diego to have our workshops in the future. And we have 4 levels. We have the opera discovery level, the introductory program, then we have more advanced levels. And we're introducing a young professional program for professional studies for young professionals that are they're still establishing themselves and they just come for polish. What we do is we try to guide them and teach them how to take advantage of what's available in their various what resources are available to them. Where can they go to get this? Where can they go to get that? And we work with different, of course, different levels have different problems. If it's a very young singer, they basically just need to learn how you learn. If you're not getting a one-on-one coaching in your school, you need to find a private way to supplement that. You have to find a way to do that.
What is the most common issues among the young adult singers? What are the most common issues you confront, that they don't know where to find the resources or they have mislearned something?
Well, the problem is they learn too much on their own in the beginning, and then they have bad habits because they're not supervised. And really young people need to be more supervised in how they learn. And then the older a person gets and the more experience they get, the less supervision they need. Like in our program, the kids in the opera discovery program, they're not even allowed to practice on their own until they understand what it is that they're supposed to do. And then as the older they get, the more they can do whatever they want, because the older they are, the more they know their limits, and they know when their voice is getting tired and they quit. Most of them.
Do you still see a voice teacher or a coach?
I see coaches but not voice teachers. Actually, teaching has become my voice teacher. It's very interesting because when I started teaching, it actually made me a better singer. Because I had to explain what I was doing.
Before I open it up to questions, because in our last few minutes I invite the audience to ask some questions, any exciting projects coming up that challenge you with new repertoire or some other work that you're doing?
Well, I'm doing the old Countess and Peak Dom.
Fabulous.
So.
Great role.
Yes, that's an interesting role.
And is that your first time? Is it?
Yes, it's the first time I'm doing it.
That's wonderful.
I feel like I'm in an old murder mystery or something.
But I don't know anyone who's sung that role with as much voice as you have. Normally, that's the role where someone doesn't have any voice left. I think it's going to be fabulous to hear you in that.
Well, I think they wanted a spectral sound in the ghost scene.
Listen to hear what spectral sounds like. Let me turn it to our guest here tonight. Questions for Ms. Zajick? Please raise a hand and ask away. Front row.
I'm curious, you spoke about your early training and meeting Ted Puffer and so on, but go way, way back. Did you, was it family fun to sing? Did people make much of you when you were 10 at social events or something if you sang? No.
I had no musical training as a child. Absolutely not.
And no play, you didn't play?
Well, we sang together for fun. In fact, we sang 3-part harmony without even realizing that's what we were doing. We were inventing it. It was always a challenge to find the third pitch of the triad. And I didn't know when I got to school that there were names for those things.
You got to school, you mean to college?
No, when I was a small
Okay,
child.
got it. So when you went
When
to
I was
school,
like 10, 11 years old.
you had music in the classroom in elementary school?
No, not much. I got to be a chicken in the first grade.
A dramatic chicken, I'm sure it was.
Is there an upper limit to your training program? Is the first part of my question.
Okay, the upper limit is our, it's for age 34, but that's for basically young professionals that already have they either have management or they're just coming out of a training program or they're in the last stages. Like we've had some Adler fellows, in our advanced program. And, so certain things, in other words, if we take somebody that age, a lot of things have to be in place. So
How many faculty do you have? What's
our
that?
ratio is 1 to 2, 1 faculty to 2 students. So they get a lot of individual work. They get body movement, they get acting, they get German and Italian diction. We're going to be adding a French person as soon as we can do it. They get.
How long is the program?
It's 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
But we also have master classes throughout the school year into various places given by various faculty members. And also coaching, like the kids in New York, we have some coaches that they can go to in New York.
Right.
And most of our coaches work on or work with professionals. But they also understand the adolescent voice, which we make sure that they understand because that's very important, especially for young men. I think it's very important how you handle a young man's voice as an adolescent. And we work with changing voices. We've started with singers that had unchanged voices because they showed such remarkable talent.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Are there web resources when people say, I want to learn about something? Is there a place you say, go check out on the website, your site or others, to find resources, articles, listings of teachers, anything like that?
We don't have a list of teachers that we publish. What we do is we basically give them guidelines as to what you look for in a teacher. And what we do is we bring teachers in to our program, and then we see which ones the students click with. And we do a lot of group teaching. We don't, we're not into possessiveness, and we discourage it. And most of the teachers enjoy it. I mean, the teachers that we have, we've been very fortunate to have really great voice teachers and coaches in our program. And we wait and see where the chemistry arises and where the most progress is made. And usually the older students, they usually make the right choices as to who they should be working with. And then they hook up with those teachers. And if that doesn't work, then we go to step 2 and say, okay, why don't you try? This teacher might be right for you. It's such an individual thing because I might send someone to this teacher in San Francisco, but it might be a totally wrong teacher for this person who would be better off at Curtis because there's a teacher there that might be right for their voice. So it's very individual. I can't really, we don't have a list that we publish.
Yes.
You were talking earlier about like singing by feeling. What was it? Kinesthetic empathy?
Yes.
Did you say? And I guess I've been lucky that my teacher has kind of like gone that route. But do you think that's not being taught or conveyed as much anymore? And if it's not, like,
I think good teachers do it instinctively, even if they don't call it that. I think that good teachers do that.
So it's not a problem that isn't being taught or communicated as much anymore?
I think that singers do sing less in their bodies than they used to.
What does that mean? Less in their bodies.
Well, it's like closing your eyes and knowing where your left toe is. It's knowing what your body is really doing. It's being connected to your body. And if you're connected to your body, then you can make it work better. If you're not connected to your body, you better not be a singer. And that, when they talk about that visceral singing and that visceral sound and it's connected to the gut, that's what you're talking about. They can feel their breathing mechanisms. They feel what the diaphragm's doing in their abdominal muscles in their back, and they can feel what's going on, and they know when it's right, and they sense when it's right. It's a very visceral thing. It's not a cerebral thing at all. And singing, the act of singing is actually quite simple. but it's a very complex process to discover those simple things. Could take you 10 years to discover those simple things, but when you finally discover them, you go, that's all it is? I remember telling my voice teacher that he put his hand on the piano, he said, why do I do this to myself?
When you teach, do you talk a lot about the mechanics of singing, or do you use analogy and...
I'm pretty much a plumber. I believe in very, it's very mechanical, very mechanical. For example, if you talk about resonance, what really is resonance? Well, it's overtones. Okay, how can you tell? Okay, you listen for it, and you tell the singer, yes, you're doing it, no, you're not, and see if the singer can recognize it. Okay, first they have to be able to recognize it. That's really important. And then you teach them to manipulate it. Okay. All it is you're moving around the formants in the mouth. You're moving your tongue around in the mouth, and that's what causes resonance. That's how you control resonance. Everything else is a sounding board. Your sinuses, you can move your soft palate a little bit, but not really that much. The thing that really moves is your tongue. And if your jaw's in the way, your tongue's not going to be able to move. So your jaw has to be really relaxed. And have you ever heard of the two in Mongolian throat singers? All right. There was a Scientific American study. They're trying to, how did these people get two pitches at the same time? Or just hum and get a resonance on top of it and shift the resonance around? Well, they did it all with their tongue. They moved, there's two schools. One is where they use their false vocal folds and they move the tongue this way. Okay, that's not good for opera singing. Then there's one where they use their normal voice and they just move the middle of the tongue up and down. They manipulate the middle of the tongue and that chamber between the tongue and the hard palate. And that's all it is. I can give you a demonstration.
Yes.
I mean, all right.
So it's like when my inner voice is in the room.
Okay, so. All I'm moving is my tongue. That's it, and I'm giving it airflow. If you don't have enough air, you won't have any. You won't be able to get those resonances because airflow is inextricably linked with focus. They're very intertwined. That's why it's so hard to teach. It's one of the reasons why it's hard. Another reason why it's difficult to teach is because the muscles that you use to breathe in are totally different than the muscles you use to exhale. And then what you do naturally, you use a different set of muscles than what you do when you control it. So that makes it very confusing for singers to learn how to breathe. And so you have to hone in on where they are for them. And it's different for back sizes. So if you have a long torso, you're going to tend to do it more with your back muscles. And if you have a short torso, you're going to do it more, and you're going to torque it right there in the rib cage. So because back shapes are different, so there's not a one-size-fit-all. It's exactly where that takes place, but it does take place.
Wow, just as someone who knows about singing, I have a feeling that about 50 of us are going to be trying that out tonight. Every apartment building in New York is going to have this weird sound. Are there other questions?
I have another, if
Sure.
nobody else. For people who are just in the semi-professional or just getting to the place where they can start making their living from singing and they're just trying to get gigs and trying to get experience or roles under their belt, since there are less opportunities for dramatic singers to actually sing the rep that they are most comfortable in, how okay is it to sing other roles just to get work or experience?
The worst thing you can do is sing something that's wrong for you.
Right.
That's like the death knell, because people will hear you and they'll think, oh, she doesn't sound very good. Never sing repertoire that's wrong for you. Singing repertoire that's too small for you is just as bad as singing repertoire that's too big for you.
Right.
But also keep in mind what that really means, because you can sing Mozart and Verdi at the same time if you're a certain kind of soprano. So it depends on which different voice fox have different requirements.
Right.
Well, we've come to the end of our hour, and I just wanted to express on behalf of all of you my gratitude to Dolora for being with us tonight. And although she's used to it, why don't we give her the sound of applause? As ever at an Opera America Making Connections, we have a casual reception where we have just a couple little nibbles and a drink. You're welcome to stay. You all have brochures about our annual conference and upcoming Making Connections. We'll look forward to seeing you back here on the 18th floor, at least for the next year, and look forward to seeing you now in just a couple of minutes. Thank you so much.